Yes, hello everyone. I believe we're all doing great. You're welcome to this live class. Okay, so we are going to be looking at complex numbers. So it's going to be very interactive in the sense that I keep posting, I give you questions, and you answer, you reply immediately. Okay, so that we can follow. I can be sure that we're understanding everything that I'm saying. Okay, so we are starting with complex numbers. Now, by definitions, complex numbers are numbers of the form a plus ib. Okay, now basically, under types of numbers, you can categorize numbers as either real or complex numbers. So complex numbers, another word for complex number, they are imaginary numbers, meaning numbers that do not exist literally. Okay, so where A is called the real part and B is called the imaginary part. Okay, and I is square root of minus 1. Now, of course, if you check your calculator and you press square root of minus 1, you are sure to get math error. That's to show you that square root of minus 1 does not exist. Okay, and that is why we give it that symbol as I. So whenever you see I actually represent the square root of minus 1. Okay, so when you have your a plus ib, let me rewrite that. When you have your a plus ib, okay, this your a here is called the real part. Okay, so a complex number has two parts, has the real part and has the imaginary part. While your b here is called the imaginary part. So the b, that means the number attached to a is the to I is the real part, is the imaginary part, sorry, and while the other number is the real part. A good example is if I have something like this, 10 plus 5i. So it means that this is the real part, which is our a, and 5 is the imaginary part, which is our b. Okay. Now, the idea of complex number came to be by considering factorizing quadratic equation. Now, if you remember, in our classes on quadratic equation, we say that every quadratic equation has, there are three types of roots that the quadratic equation can have. One of them are real roots, the other one is imaginary roots, the other one is equal roots. Okay, so it's either the root of a quadratic equation is real and distinct, or it is imaginary, or it is equal. Okay, so if you take this equation now, we cannot factorize that equation, so we have to use formula method. So where your a, which is the coefficient of x squared, is 1, your b, which is the coefficient of x, is 2, and your c is 2, the constant coefficient. So if we substitute into our formula, our quadratic formula, you will notice that at the end of the day, we are going to get to this point where minus 2 plus or minus square root of minus 4 over 2. Now you can see square root of minus 4 there, which is supposed to give math error. There is nothing like square root of minus 4. It does not exist in the real plane, but it exists in the imaginary plane. Okay, so in that case, square root of minus 4, we can write it as square root of 4 times minus 1. Okay, where square root of 4 is 2, then what remains there is square root of minus 1. Now, which will now represent as 2, square root of minus 1 is I. That's why we have it as 2i here. Now, when we divide by 2, we get this. So we can now conclude that this, if we represent it as a plus ib, the imaginary part, which is b, is equal to 1, which is the coefficient of I here, is 1. And the real part, which is a, is equal to minus 1, which is the number that does not have I. Okay, so that leads us to powers of I. Now, the powers of I is, remember, we have I to be square root of minus 1. Okay, that's the value for I. If we say I squared, what does it mean? If we square I, it means the square root of minus 1 all squared. Okay, sorry, let me return this here. It means the square root of minus 1 all squared, and square root of minus 1 all squared is minus 1. So that means I squared is actually equal to minus 1. What if we have I cube? What is I cube? I cube now is we can rewrite it as I squared times I. You know, I cube is I squared times I. Okay, and I squared we've seen is minus 1, so we can say minus 1 times I. So that means I cube is the same thing as minus I. Now let me do one more. What if we want to find I raised to power 4? I raised to power 4 means I squared times I squared. Remember, we got I squared to be minus 1 times I squared is also minus 1. So minus 1 times minus 1 now gives us what? 1. Okay, so that means I raised to power 4 is 1. That's it for the powers of I. Okay, so now look at these questions. Do this now. Post your answer on the group. You know, I'm going to vet it. Then we see the next aspect.